Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And while last time we did the top 10 worst hit songs of 2013, now it's time we talk about the other side, the top 10 best hit songs of 2013. Now here's a fun fact about me. As much as I like to nitpick and criticize and say all manner of things people don't want to hear about things that they love, I've got my own fair share of popular music that I do cherish, appreciate, or outright love myself. Sometimes quality does rise to the top, and while none of this particular list will show up on my upcoming list of the best songs of 2013, I still think it's worth mentioning even to reinforce some vague sense of populism that I do have. But really, it's nice to point out that sometimes mainstream music gets popular because it's good. And sometimes pop or country or mainstream hip-hop or indie rock can be just as good as the most underground of hits that will never get airplay. Now, the rules are as before. The songs have to debut in the Billboard Hot 100 year-end list this year. So as good as Die Young by Kesha or Some Nights by Fun are, I'm not going to mention them again on this list after they already made my list last year. And on that note, don't expect any sort of coherent theme to these picks. While my year-end worst list had an abundance of terribly vapid luxury rap and all sorts of awful egregious things that came with it, on a year as varied and confused as the 2013 chart would indicate, my choices might just surprise you. And fair warning, you won't agree with the majority of this list. Just accept it, folks. So, let's get started with some honorable mentions, shall we? Now, 2013 was a year where teen starlets returned in a very big way, and while Ariana Grande pleasantly surprised, Miley went wild to mixed results, and Selena Gomez just turned to crap, and this big surprise came from Demi Lovato and her panic song about the encroaching feeling of love that she can't quite understand or follow. And Heart Attack works on that dimension because Demi Lovato just really sells how anxious and emotionally unprepared for new love that she is. And the song's fast-paced, pounding energy and matches that mood. And while she may be putting her defenses up, it's the sort of desperate last-minute defense that even she might doubt. It's a song about being under pressure, and Demi Lovato just did a surprisingly effective job of pulling it off. I liked it. And now we have a very good song from a band I had long ago dismissed for delivering weightless generic paddlum. But god damn it, if Ryan Tedder and OneRepublic didn't try to prove me wrong with Counting Stars. The entire song surrounds the choice to take risks with one's artistic direction. Go in a direction that might prove financially ruinous or dangerous. And indeed, OneRepublic's venture towards material with a pulse sounds significantly different than the majority of their material from before. And yet, it might just be their best hit song yet. Counting Stars has a sense of drama and stakes. Ryan Tedder sounds like he's actually trying for once, with the vocal production eased back to sound a little bit more raw, and the instrumentation has punch and draws upon gospel elements to strong effect. Yeah, it's not as good as the Yeah Yeah Yeahs experiment with gospel and sacrilege, but it's a good second. I have no idea how I feel about this song. You know what, I know I like it. I mean, it's trying to do something interesting and thought-provoking, but AWOLNATION's Sail is just a song from a different universe, and the fact that it somehow managed to chart, let alone that it managed to chart the entire year, still blows my mind. The synths and dubstep-inspired beat are eerily powerful. The vocals and production occupy an odd space between raw and reserved, and the lyrics seem to be operating on multiple levels of irony or sarcasm simultaneously. And while I can't help but wish that Muse's Madness should have taken this song's place for their similarities in instrumentation, AWOLNATION's odd brand of insanity manages to work, at least for me.
And we'll never be royal.
Now look, I'll be the first to admit that I was hard on Royals, Lorde, and her album Pure Heroin when I reviewed it, but that doesn't mean I don't like it, or this song, and that she doesn't have tons of talent in crafting a smart, dangerously intelligent pop song. And while I do have some issues with the song, the minimalist instrumentation doesn't do a lot for me, and Lorde's insistence on dominance lacks a clear rationale or motive or endgame, I get why so many people fell in love with this teenager's unique brand of a cappella inspired music and enough to send it to #1. And this becomes an anthem for my generation, finally pitching this shallow luxury rap to the wolves? You know what, I might just let Lorde become my queen bee after all. Just release Team as your next single. Let that gain some swell. I like that song.
I don't wanna lose you now.
God damn it, I wanted this song to make my year-end list. But you know what, in the end, Mirrors, my favorite song of Justin Timberlake's entire discography, ends up being handicapped by the ego in the lyrics and the song's excessive length. I've said my lengthy pieces about Justin Timberlake this year, so I'll say this. If Justin had just made the radio edit of this song his album cut, well, I gotta admit, the ego would probably be a little insufferable still, but it would at least had a better chance of landing on this list. Because between the chamber pop production that just sounds majestic and powerful and epic, and Justin's impassioned delivery, Mirrors could have been sold much more.
I came in like a wrecking ball.
Okay, let me establish this once and for all. And for the exact same time that when I reviewed Bangers 3 months ago, I don't care about Miley's controversy, and I don't care about the Wrecking Ball video. I don't think it's all that scandalous when Miley decides she wants to take all her clothes off and wreath all over construction equipment. I'm here to talk about the music, after all, and Miley Cyrus's Wrecking Ball, it's a song that really works for me. I said it back on that review, I say it again. Miley's vulnerable delivery on the verge of tears, the synth sounding just processed enough to keep Miley central in the spotlight, the lyrics that properly frame the situation to highlight the fault from both parties. All of it comes together into a song that really deserved a better music video than it got. And well, it's not the best song off Bangers, it's damn close.
So wake me up when it's all over.
Another song that just missed the list by a hair. While Avicii made his ambitious gambit to fuse folk and electronica with true, nobody could predict that Wake Me Up would have worked as well as it did. And yet, combined with a killer melody line, one of the best of the year, great vocals from Aloe Blacc, and the smoothest transition between folk and electronica production that Avicii can muster, his song managed to become a great summer jam that I really enjoyed. So why isn't it on my list? Well, I gotta admit, I'm nitpicking here, but there's one little element in the lyrics that did irk the hell out of me, and it's in the chorus. If he wants me to wake him up when he's older, when I'm wiser and I'm older, wait, how can you acquire life experience and skills, the things that make you wiser, when you're asleep? Even if you go metaphorical and suggest that waking somebody up is breaking them out of a funk or depression or their current state of their life that only love will free them from, the song still does use a lot of sleep imagery throughout the verses that doesn't quite come together, and I'm starting to think it might be viewed literally, and look, it doesn't quite save the song for me. Still, that's a great keyboard hook. And I think that's enough for those, so now let's talk about the big ones. Let's go! Number 10. Now, last year I made the comment that the only reason It's Time by Imagine Dragons managed to chart in the autumn of 2012 was thanks to Glee including it when the folk indie boom was blowing up. And while that song was good enough to land on the list regardless, it likely wouldn't have even charted or ended up on Billboard's year-end list without Glee's help. This song, on the other hand, it needed none of that assistance.
I'm waking up.
Now, the most appropriate word to describe this song is apocalyptic. The fusion of Alex the Kid's dubstep-inspired beat with thunderous drums and Dan Reynolds' howls of rage did plenty to add momentum and surge to this lumbering monstrosity of a song. And really, I mean those adjectives as praise, not condemnation. It's yet another song that plays to Dan Reynolds' nerdier tendencies. But while It's Time drew upon fantasy folk with the mandolin, surging guitar in the final chorus, and Reynolds' uncompromising sincerity, Radioactive pulls from bleak dystopian imagery into harsh tones and descriptive lyrics. If there was a criticism that I would have for the song, it's in somewhat of tone. It's a little sour, lacking some of the heft of Its Time's unwavering optimism. But you know what, then again, it's hard to be optimistic when the world is collapsing around you, especially if you might some way be the cause of it. Radioactive casts the narrator as the one contaminated, which works if you're looking for a cool adjective to describe you. Hey, cool, he's radioactive. But it also brings along the curse of radiation poisoning, and Imagine Dragons seems to at least understand that at least and play it with enough depth in the framing. And if Radioactive was about waking up and making a change, as Dan Reynolds has implied, well, he seems to have plenty aware that such a change would have very dangerous consequences. It might be good for him, but it might not be good for everyone else. But what's that quote? With great power comes great responsibility. Keep it up, Imagine Dragons. I'm looking forward to more from you. Number 9. It took me a long time this year to come around to liking the song, but when I did, yeah, it just clicks.
I got this feeling on the summer day when you were gone.
If I was hard on Lorde and Royals, I was even harder on Icona Pop and Charli XCX. And while I still think neither of their albums are all that good, I Love It shows exactly how both acts could work, pumping raw adrenaline up to 11 and slamming it into modern EDM-inspired production for a killer hit. The song isn't all that intelligent, let's stress this, and looking to inspire a lot of thought or beyond just throwing off all restraints and just going off the rails and just sheer reckless abandon. But you know what? That's what great dance music is made from. And Icona Pop, they at least understand that. And while reveling in raw, reckless adrenaline from cutting loose is far from healthy, let me stress this, and the property damage inspired by the song isn't precisely good either, let's make that clear, it's a song that works more on level of metaphor than literally, at least on a lyrical level. But really, the lyrics are mostly superfluous when compared to the fuzz-saturated, borderline industrial heaviness of the synths and the beat. And combining with Icona Pop and Charli's XCX singing at the top of their lungs, the song is intended to land with short, quick impact, which it all executes perfectly. Yeah, it's all just so dumb and shallow, but you can do that well. And Icona Pop and Charli XCX definitely deliver here. No complaints from me, I don't care, I love it. Next song. Number 8. You know, I was actually a little bit worried that I wouldn't be able to find a country song that charted highly enough to make this list, at least one that I liked. The frustrating problem is that of the better bro country songs, or at least the ones that I could tolerate, were mostly confined to the lower reaches of the chart and they didn't make the year-end list, and they never quite reached the heights that they should have. And if you were a female country act not named Taylor Swift, you'd be lucky to have a hit that reached the list at all. Now, fortunately for us, there are still some exceptions to the rule, so let's talk about one of them now. Yeah, if you know more country than Luke Bryan and Florida Georgia Line, you'll know exactly why this song is on the list. Penned by Brandy Clark, Casey Musgraves, and Shane McAnally, Miranda Lambert's Mama's Broken Heart works by going straight for convention and stereotypes and ripping them out at the roots, attacking that docile, Stepford-esque housewife fantasy and showing the bottled up, deep-seated rage buried just beneath it. It's another song that runs on reckless, barely controlled anger, but this is of an entirely different vein, curdled into frustration at outdated gender norms and family values that reward one side of the gender binary more than the other. And look, all that is good, and mind you, but what really kicks this song up a notch is Miranda Lambert's delivery. Between unfair comparisons to Kelly Clarkson and mean-spirited jabs at her physical appearance, Miranda Lambert, all the while, has quietly risen to become one of the most emotionally compelling and potent singers in mainstream country. And while her voice isn't entirely strident or have the greatest range, she plays the delicate emotional balance between a painted smile and a white-hot fury with incredible finesse, and she blows her husband clean out of the water. Now, it helps that the instrumentation and production has some potent smolder and isn't afraid to kick it into high gear when the song dives towards that pitch black territory. And really, it's a shame that this is the only country song that will make this list, but you know what? Mama's Broken Heart definitely belongs here. If you haven't heard it already, check it out. It's worth it. Number 7. Now, this was the year that EDM exploded into mainstream prominence in a big way. And like most critics, I was kind of lukewarm to it. I've mentioned a number of times in the past that outside of trance and maybe the Chemical Brothers or the Pet Shop Boys, I don't listen to a huge amount of electronica. I like music driven by lyrics as well as pounding instrumentation. And there's very few EDM songs that can manage one without compromising the other. Fortunately, at the beginning of this year, I found one that managed to surprise me in the best possible way.
Don't you worry, child.
Now, while you can't claim that Avicii's attempt to fuse folk and electronica wasn't unique, you can tell that more than a few glances were made at this song, because Wake Me Up owes more than something of a debt to Don't You Worry Child in the formula and in the execution. In the final song of their careers as a supergroup, Swedish House Mafia DJs Axwell, Sebastian Ingrosso, and Steven Angelo managed to do something deceptively simple. Take a potent synth hook, build a powerful crescendo, and marry it to the strong vocal performance of John Martin, and lyrics that are really trying a lot harder than they probably had to or was expected. And yet, it all comes together seamlessly. John Martin has a lot of texture in his vocals, and it is preserved. The melody line isn't quite as immediately catchy as Avicii's, but the production in the crescendo is better, and there's a much stronger payoff at the end of it. But the real standout here are the lyrics. They're simple reminiscence of the past, calling back to simpler times where things were good and there was love, with a crescendo rooted in the rising frustration of the current situation at the moment when things went wrong. And yet, the hook is rooted in a concept that doesn't seem like much on the surface, or something that I would even much like, that heaven has a plan. and thus you shouldn't worry. Now, on the surface, this sort of determinism would get on my nerves from a philosophical level, but it works here because they're framed as words of comfort from a parent, not as a philosophy to live by. Not that we don't have free will, but that there's a greater plan because, to quote Gandalf, even the wisest can't see all ends. Don't You Worry Child works because it taps into that euphoria of hope, and by the time that crescendo explodes into the melody hook, I can't help but have chills just run down my spine. If this was the note that Swedish House Mafia were looking to go out on, they chose a great song to do it with. Number 6. Oh boy. I'm gonna have to fight for this one. Okay, look. The opening single that alienated a good chunk of Fall Out Boy's remaining fanbase and drew the ire from plenty of haters who thought the band was disappeared for good, My Songs Know What You Did in the Dark certainly makes itself pretty damn easy to hate. Patrick Stump screaming at the top of his lungs, elements of more synthetic production, and with lyrics that seem on the surface to make no sense whatsoever. This song seems to be an incoherent mess in the death knell of Fall Out Boy. And then I looked at the song in context with the album Save Rock and Roll, and to my surprise, my opinion about the song at least got even worse. Now the lyrics actually made sense as the song showed itself to be an avalanche of bile launched at Fall Out Boy's fan base, framing themselves as a jilted lover-turned-monster at the fan base's betrayal of the band. It wasn't a song looking to build bridges after a 5-year hiatus, but to burn them, to call out all the fans who once liked Fall Out Boy and then scorn the group once the scene trend died and they just grew out of it, and then it clicked for me. And the song rocketed onto this list. Pete Wentz might present himself as an arrogant asshole in writing this lyrics, showing his contempt for everyone and everything who didn't stick around for 5 years while Fall Out Boy was gone, but the sentiment began to resonate with me in every positive review that I wrote of pop and country bands I like and then got bashed for it. I got the righteous anger that comes from being the object of hipster ironic approval rather than genuine feeling, and I understood the bile hurled at the crowd who would prefer to let their tastes in art be defined by trends rather than something real. My Songs Know What You Did in the Dark calls out those former fans and screams at them to stand up for their taste instead of kowtowing to the party line. And look, while Young Volcanoes was a better song and The Phoenix would have been a better opening single off of that messy album, this track has righteous fury. And in a year full of drand, bleary nothingness, hiding behind the shields of irony and false idolatry, it's a great song to jump into that mix. It's a Molotov cocktail. It's not a pretty song, but goddamn if it doesn't work for me. Number 5. Okay, yeah, you all knew this was coming. Now this year, the charts were run by a few major trends, and this song is just the perfect fusion of them. Electronic music that desired to mean something more, and a disco revival that aimed to bring back the flavors of the 70s into the mainstream. And in the middle, we found Daft Punk, the electronica geniuses who have been lurking just outside the mainstream acclaim for far too long, and yet finally smashed through their extraordinary album, Random Access Memories, and the surprise smash hit of Get Lucky. And, well, given that every critic on the planet has already sung the praises of the song, might as well add to the chorus. The song is incredibly catchy. The funk and disco elements and the plucky guitar and the bass and the synth lines have an incredible amount of flavor and texture. And look, Daft Punk remains some of the best producers in the industry. I'd be hard-pressed to find anyone who can deny that. Pharrell's falsetto might not be as great as Usher's, but he brings a ton of energy and sheer upbeat cheeriness to a song that had coasted by on Dance Vibe alone. And sheer upward emotional momentum is really what drives Get Lucky to its greatest strength. It's euphoric, and it's fun, with the lyrics throwing out notions of possessive desire that run in most sex songs for something where two people can come together, replacing the I with we, something that Daft Punk have always strived to do. And better still is how the song just fits so well within the album as a whole, calling to mind the grand circular themes of the album, of the feedback relationship between the creation of art and its reception by the audience. Even though Getting Lucky, pretty obvious euphemism, Get Lucky as a song is about raising the bar and going above and beyond however you wish to do it. And for once, the charts responded favorably and the song got overplayed to hell and back. And yet, that still wasn't enough to stop Daft Punk from making this list, and thank God for that. Daft Punk, the gift that keeps on giving. Number 4. Okay, last year when Some Nights made my year-end list, I made the comment that the indie rock band Fun owe a fair bit to classic rock act Queen. And to be fair, I don't think Nate Ruess has ever really denied that comparison, as if he could. But let me be blunt. More bands that sound like Queen and do it well are never a bad thing. So look, it shouldn't be any surprise to anyone that this year is on my list.
If you're lost and alone, or you're sinking like a
Carry On is probably the least complex song that Fun has ever released as a single, but it trades lyrical abstraction for empathy and it works like gangbusters. It's a song about dealing with the depression of a friend and trying to help however you can, but what Nate Ruess gets right here is small but very important. He tries his best to show empathy, but he realizes he can't quite feel everything that his friend feels, and then tries to cheer her up the only way he can and the only way he knows how, by emphasizing their own combined inherent awesomeness and how they're young and they're alive and they have the ability to soar to the stars in New York City, and how can they turn away from that? Now, let's be honest, that's a very Queen-like concept to execute in the lyrics. Sing about how awesome they are and then buoy the spirits of everyone else by letting them latch onto it. But in Carry On, the subtext finally becomes text. The entire song is a challenge, a dare to be proven wrong, and it's a hard dare to answer thanks to Nate Ruess throwing himself into the song with wild abandon, and a Brian May-inspired guitar solo that sets the Queen comparison in stone with a phenomenal crescendo that earns that dramatic payoff. It might not have the energy or grand lyrical complexity of some nights, but Fun struck gold when they saw We Are the Champions and thought it turned into something meaningful and real for somebody else. And while the song might not handle depression with the same tact or delicacy that some people would prefer, I can't deny that for me, it just works. Okay, Fun, you've hit 2 out of the park. Looking forward to that next album too, guys, gentlemen. Keep it up. Number 3. Okay, honestly, this song and the next one, they've been switching back and forth in my positions in my mind for the past few weeks. And let me stress that just because I'm putting one over the other doesn't mean that either song is any less amazing or worthy of attention, because these songs are leaps and bounds above their rest. And because in the end, look, I'm a music critic, and I have to judge music based upon its composition and its presentation, and not explicitly on the message that it carries. But that being said, I can't deny that the incredible risk that it was for Macklemore's career to make this his next single and perform it without holding back. There's a reason that political songs don't often chart in the Hot 100, particularly those targeting one of the biggest hot-button social issues in the United States with naked, uncompromising honesty. And by now, you all know what that song is.
Cant Change.
I gotta admit, I'm amazed this charted at all, let alone as high as it did. I'm grateful it did, but I'm shocked, because Macklemore doesn't mince words in his straightforward, unrestrained song supporting same-sex marriage. If we're looking for a definition of what being an ally is, it'd be hard to argue that Macklemore fills that role admirably. Speaking on the topic of gay stereotypes, the power and meaning of words and slurs, the terrible things that LGBT youth go through in mainstream America, the American establishment's reticence and fear towards social change, the hypocrisy of religion and that tolerance that condemns homosexuality for poorly articulated reasons, and, most strikingly, most daringly, the oft-perilous acceptance of homosexuality in hip-hop and hip-hop commentary, let's say, on the internet. In short, Macklemore is calling out those who are against same-sex marriage out on their shit, and combined with the restrained beat and the hook and Mary Lambert's heartbreakingly real and emotional chorus, the song hits with a ton of emotional weight. And as I said, I can't stress how stunned I am that a song like this managed to chart and gain groundswell. Politically conscientious rap gaining a foothold in the mainstream, talking about LGBT issues from a rapper who dishes out some of the most potent and sharply incisive commentary against his own genre. You don't see this. And yet, it was a message that had to be heard, and people listened. And while I can't say it was entirely linked to this song alone, the rates of acceptance for same-sex marriage and LGBT issues have only risen this year, and I can't think that's a bad thing. Macklemore is right to point out, though, that the struggle doesn't end at marriage. It ends when societal stereotypes and conventions are battered down to remove hateful and worthless bigotry. And even in Canada, where I live, and where same-sex marriage has been legal for just over 8 years, we still have got work to do. And in the end, this song is something special, and something you rarely see, if ever, in rap music. To say nothing of mainstream rap music. While I do have a few technical gripes, or a few rhymes that Macklemore could have tightened up a little bit, some of the technical songwriting could have been a little bit stronger, poignancy and intellect will always win on these issues every damn day of the week. But you know what? That's not the only spot Macklemore has on this list, which takes us to number 2. On a year where most commercial, record label-driven mainstream rap turned into homogeneous, boring dribble thanks to poor implementations of trap instrumentation sounding into luxury rap, and where it sounded like You're Not Trying somehow became the next big thing amongst rappers, this was a shot of righteous fervor that mainstream hip-hop needed, and it was glorious.
Here we go back. This is the moment. Tonight is the night.
After Thrift Shop played a little bit closer to the comedy well than I really liked, at least for its satire, Cant Hold Us is decidedly more conventional. A song about making it and finally winning success. But Macklemore went above and beyond Drake's dreary claims of started from the bottom, now we're here, and injected it with a punch of textured and energetic hip-hop with this track that grabbed a hold of a flag and held it high. And what Cant Hold Us does in its 2 verses is incredible. It features Macklemore's songwriting at his best. He bites his thumb at major labels who can't hold him back. He snubs luxury rap while acknowledging how desires of how it can be expected if you're raised on acts like the Wu-Tang Clan. And most importantly, he hammers on the point that leaders only rule on the grace of the masses. He's a populist at heart, and Cant Hold Us proves that his idealistic commitment with a ton of fervor and energy, pointing out how he never rapped for success or riches, but because he wanted to give something back to the people that actually mattered, damn it! And furthermore, that the validation for his success comes from the people who listen to his music. That's the only place that success comes from, not just by bragging and saying you have it. And you know what? If it was just that, this song would have likely made the list on that alone, but he combines it with Ryan Lewis's best production yet and a phenomenal hook by Ray Dalton, which balances dignity with an energetic verve like he was born to it. The percussion is vibrant and textured, the horns have presence and support the great melody line from the piano, and even the synthetic elements only serve to pump up the energy even further and support the organic swell of the track. And while the chorus's words could have been cribbed from any club handbook, you can't replace texture, dramatic presence, and raw charisma, the sign that you actually care about the music you're delivering, and that's what all 3 men are delivering to the table with Cant Hold Us. For a rapper who only debuted on the charts this year, Macklemore is a huge breath of fresh air, and he got it there the right way, by taking intelligent risks, speaking truth to stupid, and doing it his own way, not kowtowing to labels. And believe it or not, neither Cant Hold Us or Same Love are my favorite tracks from his album The Heist. So if you haven't already gotten that album, I highly urge you to do so. You don't hear stuff like this very often, folks. But you know what? I'm sure a bunch of you are already wondering what my number 1 song is. What could possibly be better than Macklemore? Well, here it is. Number 1. You know, I gotta say this, I honestly wish this would have had the positioning to chart higher last year when it debuted. But indie rock, it requires time to gain groundswell, and like how Pompeii by Bastille will explode next year, watch it, it's coming up. This song comes courtesy of an indie rock act that dropped their debut album in 2012, and a damn good one at that. It took too long for this song to chart, but oh god, was it worth it. There's so much about Little Talks by Of Monsters and Men that I absolutely love that I'm kind of lost of where to start. The Icelandic band effectively came out of nowhere, and Little Talks being their first hit similarly is just an anomaly in the best possible way. Now, some people were quick to brand them as Mumford & Sons ripoffs for the shouts or the pounding indie folk instrumentation, but Of Monsters and Men just blow their predecessors out of the water by just being better across the board. The twinned male and female singers both have interplay and harmonies, and relying on the audience to pay attention during the quiet, melancholy moments that pepper the song. Decidedly odd moments, too, when balanced against the exuberant and obscenely catchy horn melody line that has its own moments of great harmony. And despite the ghostly reverb in the production, the instruments still manage to have texture and creaking roughness that call back to their folk roots. But that's all in composition. Let's talk about songwriting because, oh my god, Of Monsters and Men don't shy away from the darker or more complex material for their first radio hit. You don't hear lyrics like this on the radio. At first, the lyrics, they might seem oblique, and then the interplay, the melancholic moments, the explosive bridge that seems to shout across a gap of time and space that is unsurmountable. Yeah, my friends, this is a song that's dealing with death. What some will immediately find odd about this song is that it's not dark or forbidding or even all that eerie in the vein of Sail, but instead approaching death with more naturally as one of the singers attempts to cope with the loss of the other. There's grief here to be sure, but it's quieter and more melancholy, rooted in the little things lost when the soul passes beyond the veil, the little talks, the things you don't get to say. And yet there's an acceptance in the song that death is inevitable. And while we might have our own ways of getting there at some point, we'll all reach an end at some point, whatever it might be and however we might get there. You know, I gotta admit, I love this song the instant that I heard it last year, and it's been a long time for me to actually give the song the acclaim it deserves. And you know what? It's a shame that the momentum of the indie folk boom of 2012 faltered in the way it did, because really the world needs more of Monsters and Men. It really does. So with that, you know what, folks? I'll give it this honor on my list. It's my favorite hit song of 2013, and Had it been released this year, it might have gotten a spot on an upcoming list that you'll be seeing very soon. As it is, Little Talks by Of Monsters and Men is something truly special, and that's a sign that sometimes quality, well, it does win out, even on the pop charts. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching my 2 lists here. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. My next 2 lists are going to be coming up in the next couple days. They're a long list. It takes a little bit of time to put them together. So, until then, see you next time.